Well, hello and welcome to the LLG podcast. You're listening to Deborah Evans, LLG's Chief Executive, and Dennis Hall, the Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, there is so much we could be talking about in respect of the local government sector at the moment. I recently attended the SLCC conference and it was really great to get to hear the views of the clerks and the challenges they faced in their local councils. Now, whilst it's easier to concentrate on failings and crises within the sector, it was brilliant to read in a recent edition of the MJ that many councils are high performing and delivering for their residents. Empower, alongside the MJ, have produced a list of the top 10 most productive authorities, which is the list of those who have beaten the performance odds according to their study. Now, who wouldn't want to be on that list? Authorities from around the country are reflected in the top 10, with North Lincolnshire at 10th and Leeds at 9th. However, the top three read as follows. Third place was Essex, in second place Redbridge, and in first place was York. Now, it's worth noting here that York City Council's Chief Executive, Ian Floyd, whilst obviously pleased to come out on top, was cautious about the coming years. He told the MJ that after a decade and a half of cuts, with rising demand of flat funding, the next 3 to 4 years will need more reductions and savings in an already stretched system. So congratulations to York, and let's take this as some positive news for the sector. So, from local councils to central government, the big news driving the media has been the numerous announcements made by the Labour government in respect of proposals to changes in employment law. Now, there are numerous proposals, many of which are yet to be consulted on and could take as long as 2 years to come into effect. But Dennis, you've been taking a much closer look at these. What can you tell us?
Well, yes, ministers have indeed unveiled their Employment Rights Bill to help deliver economic security and growth to businesses, workers and communities across the UK. So we will look at this important new bill in two parts. First, we will look at the main provisions and then what commentators are saying about the bill itself. The new bill, which the Prime Minister said will deliver the biggest upgrade to rights at work for a generation, was unveiled on Thursday, the 10th of October, and includes provisions to end exploitative zero-hours contracts and unscrupulous fire and rehire practices. It will also remove the 2-year qualifying period for protections from unfair dismissal and introduce a day one right for paternity, parental and bereavement leave for millions of workers. And in addition, statutory sick pay will be strengthened, removing the lower earnings limit for all workers and cutting out the waiting period before sick pay kicks in. New measures to make flexible working the default where practical will also be introduced, along with requirements for large employers to create action plans on addressing gender pay gaps. Alongside this, the government has also said it will consult on a new statutory probation period for companies' new hires. A new Fair Work agency, bringing together existing enforcement bodies, will also be established to enforce rights such as holiday pay and support employers looking for guidance on how to comply with the law. Agency officers will have inspection powers and will be able to enforce new penalties for those who breach employee rights, such as holiday pay and minimum wage. Whistleblowers will be encouraged to report bad behaviour to the new body. And its powers will not be limited to the new rights, but will also enforce a range of current rights, including the national minimum wage and certain aspects of the Modern Slavery Act. However, workers may have to wait 1,000 days before employment protections they were promised within 100 days of a Labour government taking office. And while workers will have to wait at least 2 years before many of the measures take effect, fears have been expressed about adding to the burden of overwhelming employment tribunals. And in the next piece from me, we will look at some commentary around the new bill. What do people think about it? Deborah.
Well, that's interesting what you say about the tribunal, Dennis, because if you look at the government data for the first quarter of this year, the Employment Tribunal received 34,000 single claim receipts and disposed of 31,000 of the ongoing claim cases at the end of 2024, but there was still 33,000 open caseloads within the tribunal still going through the system. It's worth noting also that the number of open lead cases stood at 6,200 at the end of the first quarter, and at the same time, there were 59,000 multiple claim receipts, and the open caseload stood at 410,000. So I think that gives a picture of a service that's already struggling under the weight of claims before it. And I think this is reflective of the strain that most of the judicial systems are currently facing at the moment in terms of backlogs and delays. Now, if the proposals go ahead, simply removing the 2-year limitation on unfair dismissal is going to impact the number of people who will be able to bring cases. And of course, sticking with limitations, the very strict time limit in relation to bringing proceedings, that of 3 months, is proposed to extend to 6 months. And that, of course, then will allow people who otherwise might not have been able to get themselves together in time to issue within the previous time frame the ability to get their case accepted. So tell me, Dennis, what have you read and heard about how these proposals have been received and what concerns people have?
Well, the new Employment Rights Bill has been criticised for delaying the new rights that it actually creates, and, as you say, for being foisted on a tribunal system that has huge backlogs to deal with already. Here's more on this. Concerns about the creaking employment tribunal system have been highlighted in response to the government's new Employment Rights Bill, which includes sweeping reforms to employment law. However, ARAG, a company which provides legal expenses insurance for brokers, insurers and solicitors, warned that the employment tribunal system simply isn't in a fit state to cope with any more claims. ARAG's claims director, Chris Millward, said backlogs have been growing for some time already, leaving both businesses and employees waiting years to resolve disputes. The latest data shows that the issues have gone from bad to worse. The number of claims is increasing, but capacity to deal with them seems to be diminishing. And the insurer points to HM Courts and Tribunal Services data that shows the open caseload of single claims was 18% higher in the first quarter of 2024 than in the same period last year. And the total number of single claims and lead cases in multiple claims was just under 44,000, also 18% higher than 2023. Millward said, "It's hard to argue that access to justice in an employment tribunal is a right that should only be earned after 2 years of service, but such a significant change will inevitably result in thousands of additional claims." Anne Dabeck, a partner in the employment and pensions team at Anthony Collins, also raised concerns about the tribunal system. She said, "Not surprisingly, day one rights to unfair dismissal have been confirmed by the bill. Whilst this may be good news for employees, this is not going to be good news for an already creaking tribunal system." She said, "We would hope that the promised statutory probationary period would go somewhere to alleviating further pressure on the system." And other commentary from the sector urged stakeholders to take part in the consultation. Elaine Hutley, head of employment at Irwin Mitchell, said, "It is crucial that organisations engage with the consultation process, as many of these changes will have a significant impact on their relationship with their staff and will affect the legal duties that flow from this. These changes," she said, "won't come into effect immediately, and we expect there will be a 2-year lead-in for most of the significant ones, such as the day one right for workers to claim unfair dismissal." And finally, Elizabeth Watt, employment solicitor at Gloucester firm WSP Solicitors, said, "The legislation could be watered down as it will typically ping-pong through Parliament. It could be years until we see it come into force, with reports claiming that in some cases, employees will need to wait nearly 1,000 days to enjoy the new rights." Deborah.
Well, interesting, Dennis, if you consider the passage of employment law development over the years. If we go back to the 1980s under the Conservative government under Margaret Thatcher, There were several laws that were introduced to restrict, well, primary trade union activities via the Employment Act of 1980 that introduced postal ballots for strikes. Then there was the Trade Union Act of 1984 and the Employment Act in 1990, which again looked at trade unions and in particular picketing. Then if we jump forward to the 2000s, we did see an introduction to the national minimum wage in the 1998 Act and the working time regulations of the same year. Feels like yesterday. We then had the Trade Union Act in 2016, which again concerned ballots and thresholds for industrial action. And then it's probably worth noting that it was 2012, actually, before the Trade Union Act, that unfair dismissal claims were extended from a 1-year qualifying period to a 2-year qualifying period. Of course, the Equality Act in 2010 was a significant piece of legislative protection, but it has been some time since the landscape, which has changed dramatically thanks to COVID, was examined. I think local government has always tried to be the most nurturing and flexible employer that it can in affording rights and protections to employees. But authorities are in a very different position to, say, small businesses who might struggle to actually retain their business if they have few staff who are absent or unable to work via the new protections that are afforded. So there is a balance to be maintained here, and we will wait to see what further consultation might come out in respect of their proposals. Now then, an edition of the podcast rarely is complete if it doesn't feature something from the Information Commissioner's Office. So Dennis, let's tick that box. What have you got for us?
Well, Deborah, there's always something new from them. The Information Commissioner's Office has launched a new data protection audit framework last week, designed to help organisations, including public bodies, to assess their own compliance with key requirements under data protection law. So let's have a look at this. The Information Commissioner's Office has launched a data protection audit framework designed to help organisations, including public bodies, to assess their own compliance with key requirements under data protection law. The new framework is intended to be used by professionals responsible for their organisation's data and a working knowledge of data compliance, which could include senior management, data protection officers, compliance auditors, or those responsible for records management or cyber security. According to the Information Watchdog, the framework can be used as a basis for creating a privacy management program, auditing existing practices against the ICO's expectations, improving existing practices, and recording and reporting on progress. The ICO said it can also be used to increase senior management engagement and privacy awareness across an organisation. Now, the framework is an extension of the ICO's existing accountability framework and has 9 toolkits covering a number of key areas, and these include records management, information and cyber security, requests for data, personal data breach management, AI, and age-appropriate design. And each toolkit has a downloadable data protection audit tracker that organizations can use to assess their own compliance and track actions that must be taken in areas needing improvement. Ian Hume, ICO's Director of Regulatory Assurance, said, "Transparency and accountability in data protection are essential, and not simply just for regulatory compliance, but for building trust with the public. Research shows us that people increasingly value the responsible use of their personal information, and they want organizations to be able to demonstrate strong data protection practices." And he went on, "Our new audit framework will help build trust and encourage a positive data protection culture, as well as being flexible in targeting the most pressing areas of compliance. We want," he said, "to empower organizations to embrace data protection as an asset and not merely as a legal requirement." Back to you, Deborah.
Now, I do get the sense, Dennis, that information governance is a difficult thing for those who are subject to it to properly understand and comply with. And I think the introduction of the designated DPO has actually, on balance, achieved the outcome it intended by giving that responsibility to a single person who then oversees regulatory compliance. Of course, not all public authorities are required to have a DPO. For instance, parish councils do not need one, but may so appoint if they wish. And just a reminder to those listening that the ICO does indeed have a vast array of guidance and toolkits available to assist with compliance. Now, just before I wrap, this week, available to members for free, we have the Eastern Region Planning Meeting and the Eastern Region Litigation Meeting. There's a lot going on in the East. We also have the Planning National League meeting happening on the 24th, which you can sign up to via the events page. In all things training, we have dealing with standards of conduct with elected members, and we also have planning committee training, both of which are available online and can be found via our training pages. Finally, our governance conference in London is booking up fast, no surprise there. Now, we'll be running 4 simultaneous plenaries, breakouts, workshops throughout the hybrid day on December the 13th in London to give you maximum opportunity to update your thinking, generate new ideas and approaches, and take time for self-development. So do take a look and join us for a great experience of development and networking. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to Bulletin 39 on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.
Goodbye.